Well, it's funny. David Spade has a great bit about John Bonet where he's like, without her makeup, she's not that hot for a 7-year-old, and it's hysterical. It's one of the funniest bits I have ever seen, and he did it, and it just I see the clip still, and I'm like, it is one of the ballsiest. But it's so funny though.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. And, actually, this is our Christmas and Hanukkah, and I guess Kwanzaa. My guest told me Kwanzaa Eve show, which it may not be, but he may be lying. But he's a great guest. But I got to tell you, I got to give you a shout out to my sponsor. Laurel Lanes down on Route 73 in Maple Shade is the ultimate entertainment center. They have 60 lanes of bowling. They have state-of-the-art arcade games. They have a private luxury suite. I mean, they have something for everyone. And you can go out there with your friends. You can go for corporate events. You can go to birthday parties. It's just a great place. And if you like ice cream, they have a little setup called Lickety Splits. And they're these homemade concoctions. And they actually have alcohol ice cream. And I've tried the bourbon butter pecan, and it's very good. And finally, go to Splits Bar and Grill. That's where every month I host Cocktails with Cooper. It's a big South Jersey networking event. And if you do a networking event there, the first time you come through, they'll give 10% back to your charity of choice. They have great food, great drinks. Their happy hour is insane, Monday through Friday, 4 to 7. And during the month, they have lots of stuff going on, like beer pong and trivia and karaoke. So go check it out. Go check out Laurel Lanes. Go to see them at laurelLanesNJ.com. Okay. We got to get to my show. My guest, I'm going to tell you something. My guest is one of these guys that actually makes me laugh my ass off on Facebook. And I will sit there. I will say to my wife, Joanne, I'll say, hey, Chuck. And she always cracks up too. He's worked with Joan Rivers. He's worked with Barry Manilow. He's worked with so many people. He was back in the golden day of New York comedy. And I have a good Bernie Perron story for him, because I know Bernie Perron's his favorite hockey player. And my guest is Larry Amoros. What's up, Larry?
Hey, all you had to do is say Bernie Perron, and you got me at Bernie. Really?
Yeah, well, no, first of all, you're a New Yorker, right? How did you become such a big Bernie Perron fan?
I lived outside of Philadelphia from the ages of 4 to 14 when I was a kid. We lived in Bucks County. And it was 67 was the Flyers' first year. I was still living there. I was like 12. And I just kind of got hooked. And I just followed his career all the way through. And I see him on Facebook all the time, and he's still like, Mr. Philadelphia. He's everywhere. He's at all events and this and that. It's like, it does my heart good. I love him.
He's a Flyer ambassador. And a few years ago, my buddy took me to he had luxury box seats, whatever, the box seats. And him and Brian Prop would walk around. I run to Brian Prop all the time. He has a business right next door, a friend of mine's business. But Bernie would always pop in, and I took a picture with him. And he said, no, and he had to get it right. He had to put like his Stanley Cup rings there. But you'll appreciate this. This is my Bernie Perron story. I was probably, sophomore in high school, and I used to hang out with this kid named Tom Watson, and we used to sit there and put the Milex Street hockey net and shoot. Mm-hmm. And Bernie Perron lived next to him. So one time, Bernie Perron comes driving home, gets out. He's got dress slacks on, like a short sleeve shirt, like that 70s shirt style. And he goes, do you mind if I get in the net? So we got there, and we were shooting. He had no pads. I mean, it was amazing. He just was like knocking shit away. And that was my Bernie Perron story. And as a kid, it was like, oh my God. And I think one of my balls got in there. I think I scored a goal on Bernie Perron. No, that's not like being a nice.
Not a lot of people can say that.
I know, but I know you'd appreciate that, because I know you love Bernie Perron.
Oh man, I remember when he got injured, his career ended in '79. They retired his jersey the following September, and I was living in New York by then. But we got tickets and drove all the way down for his jersey retirement ceremony in the game against the Islanders, and it was very emotional. I mean, he wasn't planning on retiring; he got injured, had an eye injury, and it was just a very emotional night. But it was like I got to at least be there for it, so I felt good. When your hero's done, he's done. But it was nice.
Well, it's funny. I want to talk about, your Philly and the New York connection. Now, I met you years ago, and you won't remember it. I used to work the door. I used to work the door at the Comedy Factory outlet. And before I started to do comedy. So I would sit there, there was like 5 of us. We wore those red silk jackets.
Yep.
And you were the headliner. But I want to know, when did you start doing comedy? Because, you were a New York act that came down because Clay here, he never booked Philly acts because there was really no Philly headliners at the time, and you played the outlet. When did you start doing comedy? What you got you into stand-up comedy?
Actually, honestly, laziness. I mean, I have no skill sets whatsoever. I mean, I have a degree in journalism, so I knew how to write. And I was working jobs in New York City. I was doing PR from an architect and that kind of stuff. And a friend of mine, a girl I went to college with, called me and said, "You want to take a comedy writing class?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So we did that a couple of nights, and it was taught by one of these Borscht Belt comedians, a guy named Dick Lord, who was really a great guy and funny and very nice. And there were probably 20 of us in the class. And they taught us how to structure if you're going to write comedy. But they also made you get on stage. And I had no inkling to do that. So I was writing my stuff and this and that. And at the end, you had to like get up and perform for the whole class. And I didn't want to, but he made me do it. And I was really good. That night, it was just one of those things. So a couple months later, my friend called. She said, "Let's go audition at a comedy club." I put together like a 5-minute set. You know, I mean, this is 1981. So we went down, and it was Catch a Rising Star in New York. And what they did in those days, I don't know if they did this in Philly or not. Mondays was audition night, you know, not open mic, but audition night. And they mix in auditioners with the regular headliners and the big stars and all that. And you would get up at 5 a.m. and stand in front of the club, and there could be 20 people there, and they'd give out numbers out of a hat. It's only like 5 numbers, so you hope you got one. So I picked number 3, which means I would be the third audition to go on that night. And then the guy who was number 2 got hit by a car during the day, so I moved up a notch. Good luck. And I swear to God, he got hit by a car, and I said, "Oh, good for me," because you know the narcissism was already kicking in. And I went on that night, and it was a full house. It was a big deal in New York in those days. And I have no idea what I did, but I killed. It was just one of those fortuitous oddball nights where things worked. And so they passed me on my audition and said, "You can start hanging out here," which means you can wait till 3 o'clock in the morning to get on in front of 4 drunks on a Tuesday. But I did that for a while and just kind of slowly got myself more ingratiated in the scene. I quit my job. I was like 25, 26. And I remember I called my father. I said, "I'm going to give this a shot." And he said, "Well, now's the time to do it. Don't wait till there's a family and you're in debt up to your eyes. Go do it now." And I got lucky. About 8 months after I started, I think about 8 months, a guy from HBO happened to come into the club. They were doing these young comedian specials back in those days. You know, this was before streaming and Netflix and everybody had their own special. And they had done a couple of them. And they were casting, I think it was 6th or 7th annual Young Comedian. Anyway, the guy came in and happened to see me that night. And I'm brand new. I mean, I've been doing this for literally 6 or 8 months. And he booked me on the show. So it was me and Stephen Wright and Schmuck and Valerie, both huge producers and writers in Hollywood, and J.J. Wall and the High Heeled Women and the late, great Mike McDonald from Boston. And Alan King was the host. And Alan King liked me. I made him laugh. So we taped the show. And I guess it did well because all of a sudden I have a manager. And now in those days, they just send you out on the road. And I had 9 minutes of material and I'm headlining somewhere. I don't know what I'm doing. I quit a job 3 weeks ago. I have no idea what I'm doing. But so they say, "Okay, you're booked in Houston." To do what? Were you going to go entertain Texans for 45? Are you kidding me? I don't know what to. I'm afraid of them. But I learned how to, because when you only have 12 minutes of material and you have to do 45, you better figure it out. And it turns out I was very quick on my feet. Now they call it crowd work. I called it terror. But I figured out how I could work everything in and make it into a set by using them as devices to get into material. And it worked for a while. That's what I did. And it was just literally accidental.
It's amazing that happened. And back then, and we have no mutual people like, Rich Scheidner's a good friend. He's been on the show. And then these people tell you stories.
I love Rich Scheidner. He's fantastic.
They were saying that there wasn't, clubs were opening all the time. He said, you'd be on the road and someone would be like, "Oh yeah, can you go here?" And for you, you think about it. I always like that story. I started in '88. And the first night I went on a Comedy Factory outlet, I had this great set. And I'm young, I'm cocky, I'm a fucking
Right.
headliner. And then you think, oh, I'm the best, not knowing what goes into it. And then the next week I go in and I eat shit and I don't come back for a few months. For you though, it must have been weird. Were you having some rocky times? Because the bottom line is, and people don't understand this, the difference between 5 and 8 minutes and 45 with checks dropping and all that is an eternity. I mean, how did you acclimate? I mean, was it really rough on you in the beginning, or just did you,
No, I
just roll
think
with it?
it got rougher. It wasn't rough in the beginning because I didn't know any better. I had nothing to compare it to because I was really literally. It's like a bird hatches out of the egg and they say go fly. You figure out how not to crash. So that's all I was really doing, figuring out how to get through it. And I had figured out enough that I had an opening and a middle and a closing. And the other 40 minutes were filler, and I'd figure it out. And that's what I kind of learned to do. And when I was working with Joan Rivers, it's funny because she would do a lot, or I did a lot of what it turns out she did. I write on stage. I come up with something, and I'd remember all of it, and it would become actually a chunk of material. But you try to make it look like you're fresh all the time. But in those days, there was no TV outlets. This is before Roseanne. They started giving comic sitcoms. You passed and you went on the road. That's what was available. And I was just so ill-equipped for that, but it was fun. I mean, and what was interesting is the first time I went to Vegas, they had a couple of different clubs there. Like they had the comedy. Did you ever play the Comedy Stop at the Trop or any of the Vegas gigs?
I played the Atlantic City Comedy. I was in the competition. I made the finals the year Ray Romano won.
Well,
down in Atlantic City. So
all right. That's a good loss. It's
yeah,
like
exactly.
That's what it's pragmatic. You don't feel bad.
I wasn't ready. I was surprised I made the finals because I was very unseasoned. I mean, but it was just funny. But so yeah, I remember the Comedy Stop, and there was wasn't there one at the Dunes, or there was like some.
That's what the Comedy Stop was at the top. The Comedy Store was the main showroom at the Dunes, which I eventually got to play, which I'll tell you about. I had a fun story for that. I know you'd start going, all around the country, and you learn when you go to Vegas, they'd say you have to slow it down and dumb it down. And it wasn't dumbing it down; it was slowing it down. They're not going to get a lot of stuff. These aren't like what you're used to either in New York or Philadelphia or Chicago or LA. You really had to make it more accessible, which was great to learn, especially when you're writing for other people. You have to learn what I think is very funny. I can do 5 minutes on, philosophy. Well, that's not going to play in Kansas. Not that I'm writing about farming, but you have to figure it out. So it was fun, and Atlantic City was great because it was like for people who couldn't afford Vegas.
Right.
So, you get like the poor brothers of the old lady with the buckets of nickels. But I always had fun. Philadelphia was a great town for me. It was a great town for me. I don't know why. Every now and then you wind up in a city where it just clicks all the time. Whatever the mentality is. It's funny. Boston was not. It was okay. I thought they're so smart in this and that. Was smarter than I was. But I always had a great time in Philadelphia. I had a great time in Chicago, and I had a great time in St. Louis, which is, believe it or not, a very hip town, surprisingly together.
I've heard. No, I know people who lived in St. Louis. It is a very hip town, and when it comes, I know you're a big sports fans. I mean, I remember I was sitting there. There was a comic from Philly named Neil Boble, and we started together. And his wife ended up being he worked at the Comedy Factory outlet too with me at the door. His wife ended up becoming one of the news people on KCAL in LA. And I remember they were in St. Louis and they moved to LA, and I was out in LA, and I remember watching when the Rams beat the I guess it was Tennessee then Titans the last play. We watched it. The station manager for LA was actually ended up moving from St. Louis. And we watched it, and he had bought Joey Bishop's house. So I watched the Super Bowl in Joey Bishop's house in right down on Beverly or whatever it was. It was just that's a
fantastic showbiz story.
Yeah, it's just like I'm like the guy I knew from Philly, his wife's a newscaster. They knew someone from St. Louis, and the guy, and then like the one sports announcer on KCAL was sitting in there. They'll have to go back to the studio, and it was fun. But yeah, Philly though, Philly was a great comedy scene, and I think it's also because the Comedy Factor Outlet was just a great club. I mean, that was just the way it was set up, and it just if you went in there on a weekend, if you didn't kill, get out of the business.
Yeah, it was that.
It's like
it was
the
that
Ice
kind of
House in
fun.
Pasadena.
Yes,
Yeah, it's like the Ice House in Pasadena. If you don't kill in there, quit. If you go in there on a weekend,
that's
quit.
a great
People
room.
don't get it, but that's
It's a
how
great
easy
room.
these rooms are.
Well, for whatever
So
reason,
you're doing comedy.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
No, I was just saying,
What did you say?
I don't know why the Comedy Factor Outlet was that good a room, but maybe it was the structure, the vibe. I don't know. It was just fabulous. Is it still there?
It was all that crap. No. It's like it was a hostel for a while, and then I don't know what it is now. But it's all those group like the Comedy Works, they all disappeared. So you're going on the road and you're in New York. Now I know who were some of the people you were hanging out with? I know you were friends with Rita Rudner back then, right? Like that was some of your crowd.
Here's a fun story. I'm still ridiculously close friends with Rita Rudner. So I mean, we had become friendly, and she moved in her career, jumped and went all over the place, and we had gone to Australia to work. We've got booked first at the Edinburgh Festival. Me, Rita Rudner, Bill McCarty, and I, and then Kelly Rogers, then Richard Jenny. We all kind of swapped in and out. And Rita and our producer fell in love while we were in Australia. Now they're married now, 30-something years. So our paths diverge. We go our separate. Everything's fine. Our lives, didn't intersect. About 15 years ago, I'm living in Orange County in Laguna Niguel, not where anybody in show business would go. But that's where I wound up. So I'm in Laguna Niguel, and I walk into a pet store, and I'm chattering with my dog, and I'm talking to the lady behind the counter, and we're laughing. She's laughing, and she goes, "Oh, there's a famous comedian. You know Rita Rudner?" I go, "Yeah, for a million years." She goes, "She comes here all the time with her dog." I go, "What's Rita doing in Orange County?" I said, "Here's my number. Next time Rita comes in, please give it to her." The next day, Rita calls. She goes, "We live in Dana Point down the road." Now, they also have a place here in Palm Springs where I live. We're best of friends. Rita and her husband and daughter, we have dinner all the time. It's like family.
It's so funny you say that because, I don't know, do you know a guy who I became friends with in LA and has sort of been an older brother mentor type to me? Do you know Jeff Martyr?
Jeff Martyr, his mother, Barbara, used to run Harbor Lights in Baltimore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jeff.
City Lights or Harbor something.
City Lights, I think it was. Yeah. Well, Jeff Martyr, we became good friends, and Rita did my other podcast, Cooper Talk, and Jeff sat there, and it turns out Jeff's, I don't know, first or second wife was good friends with Rita, but they lost touch, and Jeff told his first wife that I interviewed Rita, and I actually sent Rita's husband or manager an email, and they got in touch. It's just so weird how like people from the past,
yes,
that are in the comedy world or adjacent, always end up coming into connection. Like no time ever passed. I mean, for her and Jeff's wife had been sick, and so it was like this whole thing. And now they went for lunch. It's just amazing how that industry works like that.
Now it's so interesting because didn't Jeff Martyr have a great thing about left brain, right brain? He had a very
and
funny
Rita helped him with that.
I didn't know that. It was a very smart piece.
Yeah, because he told her, he said, "What do I do? I got these jokes and I got these jokes." And she goes, "I don't know. Why don't you just figure out how to do them two different ways?" And he went, "Oh, left side of the brain, right side of the brain, put two microphones." It's just one of those things, but it's just so funny how bits create. Now, for you, back then when you were starting out, what was your writing style? Like you said you worked a lot with the audience, you're quick on your feet, but was it the old LA, New York? I mean, what was your premises? Because back then material was completely different.
No, it was none of that. It was if I found something funny, I'd start writing. It's funny because when I eventually wound up writing for Joan Rivers, that's how my brain worked to begin with. I used to watch her on the Ed Sullivan Show. So I'd have whatever the premise is, my dog's so stupid, blah, 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 blah. And you write 12 jokes. Or I remember the piece I auditioned at Catch with. They used to have a thing in New York called Miss Subways, which is really like, a lowbrow beauty pageant. I mean, it's Miss Subways, it's like, can you step over the homeless in a gown? It was that kind of a thing. So I knew a girl who had been Miss Subways. And I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And you'd see them on all the subways, the sign, Miss So-and-so is Miss Subways, like it's a huge accomplishment. Like she had some teeth and a tiara. All right, so you win. So I wrote an entire bit about Miss Subways. I had like 10 or 12 jokes, ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And I'd find the 4 or 5 that worked. And then I would try to tie it to something else. And, you know, it's like, I have a dark side or like an offbeat side where, do you know Anthony Jeselnik? Have you had him on?
No, but I've been, his clips have been popping up on my reels on
Me too.
Facebook,
Me too.
and he makes me, he's hysterical. I
He's
find him very funny.
He's very, very funny, deeply funny, and you know, but he's got that dark side to it. You know, it's like I remember when when John Bonet got killed, that poor little girl. I mean, people are going, "What happened?" My first thought was, "Well, she must have said something to somebody." Like she upset someone, you know, like that's where my head went. Well, let's look at it. Or, you know, so when I stopped doing stand up, I was able to start channeling that for Joan Rivers, who had less boundaries than I did. You know, so all that stuff where it's ba-bum.
Well, it's funny. David Spade has a great bit about John Bonet where he's like, you know, without her makeup, she's not that hot for a 7-year-old, and it's hysterical. It's one of the funniest bits I have ever seen. And he did it, and it just, I see the clip still, and I'm like, it is one of the ballsiest. But it's so funny though. He's like, yeah, she's not that hot. So I got a question. So how did you end up meeting Joan Rivers, and were you already deciding to stop stand up before you met Joan, or did you want to maybe open for Joan? I mean, what was the whole relationship? Because you wrote some books with her. I believe you worked on a book with her daughter.
A couple of them. We got lucky. They both hit the New York Times bestseller list. We caught a break. Well, she put them on.
So how did you meet her? I mean, because Joan Rivers, you know, it's funny. I saw her documentary, and it was so great. And like you said, you know, you growing up, and I remember when she had her show on Fox or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
and just I remember watching her, and she made me laugh. And my parents, you know, my mom and dad, her Joan Rivers and Buddy Hackett would make my mom laugh, make her laugh her ass off. And as a kid, I remember that. But so how did you end up meeting Joan and then working with Joan? Because, you know, she's a legend, and as a writer, you have to have the chops to get that job. How did it all happen?
Well, it's funny because it was on a long continuum. When I first started, before I started doing stand-up, when I was taking that comedy writing class back in 1980, 81, whatever it was, someone told us that Joan Rivers would buy material from the outside if she liked it. So I found out who you fax it to in her office. And I wrote like 50 jokes, and I just faxed them over. I said, "Hi, my name is Larry, and I wrote these, and blah, blah, blah." And I get a call from one of her assistants saying she wanted to buy 7 of those jokes. It was like $10 a joke. It wasn't about that. It was like, oh my God. So I did that until I started doing stand-up on my own a few months later. Fast forward decades. I'm working regularly on the Mark Twain Prize at the Kennedy Center as one of the writers. And they're honoring George Carlin, who had passed away. You know, he was being honored, possibly. They announced he was accepting the award, and then he died. Joan was one of the people coming down to honor George with the Mark Twain Prize. And so she gets there and she says, "I didn't really write anything. Can you match me up with a writer?" So they put me in the room with her. She goes, "Your name is familiar." And I said, "I wrote jokes for you a million years ago." So I'm sitting in the dressing room, like during rehearsal with Joan. And she has no material. She didn't bring anything. She goes, "What makes you laugh?" And I just said, "The folly of the Holocaust." So she, "Oh, you got some balls." She goes, "What's your phone number? I want to work with you." So I gave her my number. We wrote a very funny little thing for that night for the Kennedy Center. And she calls me the next day. And she said, I want to write with you. You're very funny. I'll never forget. I asked, I said, "What are the boundaries? What's off limits?" She goes, "Nothing." I said, "What about Edgar's suicide?" She said, "I had 10 minutes before they closed the casket." And I said, "Oh, I'm going to like this. I'm going to like this." And she and I just hit it off like we'd known each other for 100 years. It was just like, you know, I'm talking to you like I know you intimately well for all my lifetime. You know, it's just a conversation. And we just got along. And we had the same sensibility. And they wanted her to do a book. So we came up with this idea called "I Hate Everyone Starting With Me." And we literally do it over the phone. I'd write something, send it to her. She'd write something, send it to me. We'd get on the phone and talk. And it became a New York Times bestseller immediately. She promoted it, obviously, and she's a big name. But it was really funny. It was really funny. And then they wanted a follow-up, and this is 2012. We're in Mexico on vacation over the Christmas holiday break. Here's how Joan was. She was so kind and generous over the Christmas holidays. Melissa and her friends and her son, whatever, and Joan rent this huge, massive estate in Mexico, in a place called Punta Mita, which is fancy schmancy. And she'd bring down 10 or over 2 weeks, she'd bring down 9 or 10 of her friends. And I'd go. And one day she and I are sitting there and she goes, they want another book. They want it fast because this one's on the bestseller list. I said, all right. And we decided we're going to write a diary. Let's just do a diary, make it easy. There's no through line, there's no thread. So we came up with the idea of Diary of a Mad Diva. And that hit the New York Times bestseller list. And after she died, she won a Grammy posthumously for it for best spoken word. It was really funny. And she was, here's the thing, it's so interesting. And look, you know this from doing this yourself and being around a long time. The character is an act. It's an act. She was the nicest, kindest, most generous, decent person. If she met you now, she'd go, hi, Steve, are you hungry? Do you need anything? What can I get for you? She wouldn't cook it. She'd say, staff, get him something. Like she'd take care, it was like, she was like your grandmother if your grandmother had a lot of money. She was just so kind. And what's interesting is, she turned into the potty mouth old lady. Not like that at home. She was elegant and, she was a lady and refined. And there was one time we were at Melissa's house and Cooper, the grandson, must have been about 10 at the time. He cursed. And Joan laid into him. She said, we do not talk like that in the house. He goes, you do. She goes, that's a joke. It's on stage, not in real life. I mean, she was elegant and just, I've been very lucky in that who I get to work with. I met so many great people.
Well, I was going to say something though. You said when you met her down the road, you weren't doing stand-up anymore. When did you get out of stand-up, and why did you get out of stand-up? Because you were a successful actor.
I was on the road, and there was no specific time. It was, back in the day when you're on the road, they used to have comedy condos. I don't know if they still do that nonsense, where the club owners figured it's cheaper to put them in a condo than rent hotel rooms. So it's like you're in Indianapolis or Omaha in the middle of the winter in a room by yourself for 23 hours a day. And I started doing a lot of drugs and drinking a lot. And it was going to kill me. And I decided I got to sober up, clean up, and get off the road. And I started as a writer. I said, I'm going to go back. And I just literally said, I'm done. I'm done. I was literally, there was one night, I'll never forget this. And this is kind of very inside, but I was in Atlanta working at, I think there was a place, it wasn't the Punchline, I'd been there. I think it was called a Comedy Spot, I think. And I'd finished my week there. And the comic who was coming in the next week came a day early. So they had me in a room with 2 beds. So he came and, I was leaving in the morning. We spent the entire night doing cocaine. I mean, the entire night. Just drinking and doing tons of drugs. We ran out of shit at about 5 a.m. and lights are out. We're both trying to crash. And you hear this pounding sound like someone's at the door. It was my heart. Boom. He literally looks over and goes, what the fuck is that noise? And it was my heart pounding from all the drugs. And I said, I got to stop. And I had one more gig to do in Houston. And I finished that and I was done. I literally thought I was going to die. You start making that deal with the devil. Dear God, if you don't kill me, I'll never do this again. I promise. Of course, I was doing it again. But until I cleaned up shortly thereafter. And I've been sober a very, very long time.
So when you got out of it, when you got out of comedy and you wanted to write, you were making good money headlining back then. So did you have a writing job right away?
Yes and no. I was making Not great money. I was making decent money because, you're on the road. Let's say you're on the road, and in those days, all right, so say you're making $2,500 a week, right? And so you go on the road for 3 weeks, you make, 10 grand. If half of it goes up your nose, you're not making great money. Now you're getting by money. I put some money away, fortunately, and when I came back, when I got a couple of writing jobs quickly because I was good. That's how I started. I started as a writer, so it wasn't that difficult to suddenly start picking up writing gigs here and there, corporate stuff, this stuff, whatever it was. But I'm convinced if I stayed out on the road, I wouldn't be alive. I saw a lot of people I work with aren't here anymore.
It is crazy when you sit there and, it just, and as you get older, it happens. And I'm 60. And I just was talking to my friend the other night about Christmas pictures. Came up with a friend of mine who died last year, a guy I went to college with who was like a big brother type to me. I found out he's sick. I mean, it's true, it happens. But for the comics, there was a lot of people who died back then. And it was just insane. So who were some of the other people you wrote for? I want to get to the Barry Manilow, but between Joan, when you got back, what were you said you were working with?
I did a lot of award shows. I worked on the ESPYs for about 10 years, which was a ton of fun. Now that's an experience because what you find is that athletes have very little humor about themselves. Not all athletes are Peyton Manning. Not all athletes.
Right.
And this is going to sound terrible. A lot of them aren't that bright. A lot of them are just even male to their jocks. But working on the ESPYs was fun. That was a great gig. Because for someone like me who's a big sports fan, that's just, it's like a kid in a candy store. I get to meet everybody, and the hosts were great. I mean, you had Samuel L. Jackson. What was interesting, I'll never hear, 1 year Lance Armstrong was hosting. It was in the middle of all the allegations about the drugs. And I remember sitting in a big production meeting. And it's all the writers and the producers and the legal team is there. And they asked him, is it true about the steroids? Is it true? And he said flat out no. Literally lied to everyone in the room. Very nice guy. But it was very interesting because you're walking that line, and it's like, what do you do? We had 1 year LeBron was hosting. And again, LeBron James was really, really nice. But he insisted on rapping. He wanted to do a rap song, and he's the only black person in America who has no rhythm and can't rap at all. Can't whine, can't dance, can't move, can't rap, nothing. I was sitting there during rehearsal, and we're all sitting watching him, and the producer goes, you want to tell him? I said, I'm not telling him, you tell him. He's terrible. I mean, it was awful. But he's LeBron fucking James, go do it. Then we had, oh my God, do you know Bill Sheft?
I know the name.
Okay. Oh, you should get him.
I know the name.
Yeah, he was at Letterman for a million years. One of my best friends. So I think it was Greg Jennings and me and Ed Driscoll and Billy work on the ESPYs 1 year. And this, I can't remember the kid's name. Oh, it'll come to me. They always do some heartfelt, pull at your heartstrings kind of award, some special presentation to some kid who was run over by a truck and he's a pancake, but he somehow slithered the marathon 26. It's one of those stories, The house is on fire and he ran in and saved his gold medal that his mom was shooting heroin. One of those. So they get this kid who, some poor kid, he's probably 12, whatever it is, I don't know. And he's got some sort of dysfunction. And the true story it was actually a very touching story. I think his name was Jake. A very touching story where the kid was the water boy for the football team. And he's going to graduate, or however he's going to graduate. So it was last year of school. And the the final football game of the year, the coach went to the coach of the other team and said, look, if the game's out of hand, we're going to put the kid in. We're going to suit him up, put him in. Could you let him score? And they both agreed to this. Well, that's what happens. The footage is, they put the kid in the game, and the other team lets him run for a touchdown, and it is the highlight, not a dry eye in the house. It was truly very touching. So they're going to bring the kid out to give him the award. Well, no one found out or no one asked if the kid has Tourette's syndrome. No one checked. So they go, ladies and gentlemen, Jake, blah, 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 blah. And they comes out, fuck me, eat me, fuck me. And we're just, I am telling you, you have never seen writers laughing till we wet our pants backstage. Thank you, fuck me, thank you. We are dying. And I'm standing next to the head of ESPN, and he goes, go get him. I go, you go get him. Come on, it's not my job. It was just, that's when they stopped doing it live. And they did it live to tape.
So,
oh my God.
So what are some other shows you've written on? Well, I want to get first. We'll get to that. I want to go. What do you do with Barry Manilow? How did you end up with Barry Manilow?
Greatest gig in the world. Greatest gig in the world. I just came off the road with them on Saturday. In the early '90s, he always worked with a comedy writer or a comedy writer producer type. He used to work with Bruce Valanche. Then he worked with Roberta Kent. In 1992, I think it was 92, I was living in LA, and he was looking for somebody, he needed a new writer person. And I get a call from his publicist, and I was a big Barry Manilow fan. I mean, I grew up, he's one of my guys. It's like, Barry Manilow, Elton John, the Eagles, that was it, Linda Ronstadt. So they want to meet me. So I go and I'm doing an interview with his publicist, his director, and all that. And it was a couple of nights later, and it's actually a night we're breaking the Yom Kippur fast at my house. I finally had people over and this and that. And the phone rings, and he goes, "Hi, is Larry there? It's Barry Manilow." And it was Barry Manilow. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're breaking the Yom Kippur fast." He said, "Chew fast. I want you to come over." I said, "All right." So I hung up, gave me the information. I said to everybody else, "Clean up and let yourselves out." And I drove over to his house in Bel Air and met him. And we got along great right away. Just got along just easy. And so I started writing for him, just a little bit here and a little bit there. Then he started bringing me on the road periodically, when he needed me for stuff, or he's on doing a tour, whatever. And over the last 10 years or so, 7 years or so, I've been there, not full-time, but close to full-time. I'm on, whenever he's doing a show, I'm there. And one of the reasons I live in Palm Springs is because he lives here. And I was commuting from Laguna Beach, and it's just too far to drive. It's, you're driving 120 miles each way 3 days a week. So I moved out here about 5 years ago. And he's one of my best friends, one of the greatest gigs. He's as good now as he was then. And for the people who don't know his music or don't like Barry Manilow, go see it live. Go see it live. He's a radio. You should come.
What do you do for him? What do you do for him? Like when you're on the road for him, do you write material? I mean,
yes.
What do you?
Yes, if we're on the road,
he's a showman.
Let's say we're going on a 10-city tour, which we're doing in May. We'll change the show every night based on where we are. The set list may change every night. He changes it up a lot, and we'll write something specific for where we are. And in the morning after the show, we get together and we watch the entire show, watch the rundown, what worked, what didn't work. Even simple things like the lighting cue is off over here; it's pulling focus, or the band's too loud. I can't hear you when you're talking. It's all that. It's like creative consultants. It's like, I'm his creative backboard. We bounce stuff off each other. And when we write, it's together. I mean, I sit and I talk to him like I'm talking to you. What are we looking for? We need something here. We need something there. I want to try this. And it's a great gig. He's like one of my best friends. He is an absolute gentleman. I'm really lucky. He's a nice guy.
Well, what's fascinating about him also is, and I know people who just recently saw him in Philly and people who said he was amazing. It's not like he's some 55-year-old guy anymore. He's sitting there and he's doing the grind and he's putting the show on where a lot of people I saw the Beach Boys with, I think it was Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I got lucky. I had really good seats because one of the guys, Chicago, was supposed to be on my podcast, and he couldn't do it. So I just said, "Hey, can you put me on the guest list?" And they did. I figured my mom always said ask.
Nice.
But Brian Wilson was opening, and he should not have been on stage.
Brian Wilson was with them?
Yeah, this was 2 summers ago. And so they basically bring him out in a wheelchair, and he just sits there, and the other people, like the original Beach Boy, like some of the guys, not like Mike Love wasn't there or whatever, but it was it was sitting there, and it was like it was billed as Brian Wilson, not the Beach Boys, but it was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is his family must be awful because he only sang a few times, and it looked like a Martin Short sketch, like one of those things when he sang. But that's like, well, Manilo's got his shit together. I mean, people I know were like raving about him. They said he's still such a showman, and he's I mean, he's what, 75, 80? He's not like he's young
81.
anymore.
He's 81.
Yeah,
and you would never.
It's insane.
It's kind of like that ageless thing where you see him walk on stage, you would have no indication how old he was. He could be 40, he could be 60. You would never figure it out. He moves as well. I mean, I'm telling you, it's like he's a better performer than he was 40 years ago. I mean, he sings, he dances, he's funny, he's all over the place. He plays great keyboard. I mean, it's the show itself is about as hip as it gets. There's LED screens and the lighting, and when he's putting the show together, he sits with the lighting guy all night long for 2 nights, lighting the entire show. He sits with the choreographer, choreographs the whole show himself with them. Writing the show, putting the show together, he sits with me. And his work ethic it's what he lives to do. You hear people say, well, music is my life. It actually is for him. I mean, this is what he does. And I mean, if you think he has a lifetime residency in Vegas. He has a residency at Radio City Music Hall 2 weeks every year. We have 2 tours scheduled. He just did a month at the Palladium in London last month. Last year. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I tell anybody, go when he's in New York or Philly next year, you'll come. I mean, I think we're hitting Philly, or you'll come to Radio City. You give me a heads up. It's phenomenal.
All right.
He's that good.
Now, okay, so I'm going to get back to your comedy writing because I find your posts really funny on Facebook, and you write some dark shit, and you don't. What I like is you don't care. Sometimes I want to put something. I'm like, I gotta, because I also do stuff in the business world. I got to watch, what they say. But for you, have you? Well, you said earlier you've always written like that. Is there any time where you've gotten flack for something you've written? Have you personally gotten shit for something, or in any of your writing jobs, because you do go off the cuff and you write some stuff, and I know you. I love when you make fun of sports. I don't know if you make fun of because I used to get chicks. I used to say, I lived in LA. I would go to Dodgers games, and I actually had part season tickets to the Dodgers.
Did you really?
I would say going to the Dodgers game is like watching an episode of Gangland, and people got pissed off in the audience because it was. I was like, it's the Mexican Mafia against the MS-13, whatever. 13.
Oh, it is absolutely.
They're fighting over a 99-cent beach ball because that was always the Dodgers games. They didn't have beach ball around. But
that's hilarious
because you write some really off, and I think it's funny, and I think most comics will find it funny, but you always get some people, like some comics, who get pissed, and you're like, you know what, you're a comedian. Now I can understand if it's really distasteful. But so have you gotten professionally any shit for something you've written in your career where you've regretted a little bit?
No, you'll get every now and then. So it's mostly Facebook stuff. They'll say too soon, and I don't believe in too soon. I just comedically, I don't. I think if your mind works fast enough that you can get to the joke that fast, good for you. And it's like Joan used to always say. I remember when she was promoting one of the books, and she was on Tavis Smiley on PBS. And he said, you say a lot of things that are very cutting and a lot of things that offend a lot of people. What do you say to that? She said, don't buy a ticket. Turn the channel. She goes, you're not a hostage. You don't like it? Don't come see me. Go to another show. Turn the TV off. I'm not forcing you to watch. This is what I think is funny. If you don't think it's funny, watch somebody else. I'll write something for anybody. If you don't like it, don't use it. And it's like, even though, like, you'll hear from the general public, I'm sure if you post something, when you put stuff on Facebook or anywhere, they'll say, oh, I didn't like that. Well, then don't laugh. Don't laugh.
I did a show. It was for a company that outsources HR. And there's a guy I know, and it was in a microbrewery. It was and it was a networking thing. And they know what I do. And the one lady I know, she's like, it was really funny, but you were really off color. And I was like, well, you know what? It's a comedy show. You're all adults, and that's the thing people don't get. I mean, I think though, it's been. I'm trying to think of the word. I think people have overreacted too much of saying that the crowds don't laugh at anything anymore. Because all the show, I don't perform a lot, but all the shows I do, maybe because my crowds are 40 and up, but no one gets offended. And everyone was making that big thing. Everyone gets so offended so easily. I really don't see it. And you've had a long career writing, and I mean, do you think people are get offended, or do you think that's just
I think
something like
yes
in
and
the
no.
media?
I don't know. It's like the way everything's broken down nowadays to the right and the left. The way I tell people, I said, well, on the right they don't get the jokes, and on the left they're offended by everything. So let's go to the middle where everybody else really lives. If I'm doing a joke about someone who's fat, I'm sorry, she weighs 900 pounds. What would you like me to say? She can't fit in a car without a crane. What would you like me to say? It's normal. It's okay. It's funny. I'm sorry. It's not a matter of being woke or unwoke. It's a fucking joke. Again, go back to Joan. She used to say, if something I say bothers you, she goes, I'm a clown. Call your congressman. I'm not running for office. I'm making a joke. Well, I don't think it's funny. Then don't laugh. I don't, we talk about getting older and whatnot. I'm at a point, I'll be 70. I don't give a shit. I don't care.
What?
You get to
I always say, my wife, well, my wife always says I'm like the get off the lawn guy, but I always say we live in a condo, so I don't have a lawn. I just give people the finger out the window, and it's true. I mean, it's one of those things but you're right. You get to a point where you're like, I don't have the time for this shit, and it's like I've had health problems in the past. I mean, I was in a hospital for 7 days, and my wife was right. I wasn't, we're getting married a few months later. Of course, I told her I'm not going to die because I'm cheap and I'm not losing the deposit. I mean, that's just my thing. But you don't get to a point where you just don't give a shit. Like when you've sat there, and I know, and I'm not. You just had cataract surgery, didn't you?
Oh, this has been a year. I've had my left shoulder was completely replaced. I've had 2 eye operations here, cataracts on both eyes, and I'm having spinal fusion surgery in July. I think I have to have an epidural on Thursday. I have 3 crushed discs. A lot of it, believe it or not. And it's from all the years of playing hockey. Because I said, why am I falling apart? And the doctor just said, well, you're paying for the dance now. You see like all those football guys that can't walk 40 years later.
No, is hockey your number one sport? Because I know you write a lot. When I was thinking, who are your teams? Like baseball. I know you're making fun of Ohtani and the Angels, but are you a Yankees, a Mets, a Dodge?
I'm a Yankee fan. I'm a Dodger fan. I also like the Mets, and I still like the Phillies a little bit.
Okay.
If it comes to, the Yankees, Dodgers, I was torn. I just wanted a good series because they're like my. And with regard to Dodgers, when I was born in Brooklyn in 1955. The year the Dodgers beat the Yankees in the World Series, and my parents lived in an apartment across from Ebbets Field. And somewhere there exists a photo of my father. I was a toddler, a baby. During the World Series, I'm sitting on his shoulders, and they could see over the right field wall to where Carl Furillo was in Brooklyn. So I grew up across the street from Ebbets Field as a little boy. I became a Yankee fan because honestly I hate Mets uniforms. When I said it looks like Howard Johnson's. It's preposterous, like an ice cream party.
And then Howard Johnson managed them. How ironic is that?
So I just said anyway, but I love baseball. I love hockey. I love football. I love tennis. The only sport I don't really like is basketball for 2 reasons. One, when I was a kid, it's the only sport I had virtually no aptitude at. Nothing. I was terrible. I couldn't dribble. I couldn't shoot. I couldn't figure out the plays. I was awful. And I never liked it. Plus, it seems to me the first 100 points are superfluous.
It's true.
You only need to four.
I don't watch it. Yeah. So you met a lot of great people. Give me a few good celebrity stories, Larry. Give me some funny things that happened, because you have to have a bunch, and you'll probably write a book in a few years, and it'll be a bestseller.
I would never write a book. We did a thing once. Not really a funny story. Jimmy Smits was hosting the ESPYs during the height of NYPD Blue, and he had just quit the series and was being replaced by Rick Schroeder. So he's hosting. So we're all sitting in a meeting, and I just had this idea. I said, "How about halfway through the show, you're Jimmy Smith." I said, "You're introducing somebody, and you get that Bobby Simone and what death rattle, that cough, that oh Diane, and you walk off, and Ricky Schroeder replaces you." and it was great. It just killed. Trying to think of any really odd stories that I could. I don't know. It's not like we were at one of the Mark Twain prizes. They always have the night before. They have a big dinner, like the big cast and crew and production dinner at the Four Seasons. And they were was they honoring Carl Reiner that year? Carol Burnett, maybe, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, they go around table to table making toasts. And the last toast was Tim Conway, who is deeply, deeply funny. And we're there for 3 hours, and Tim Conway just stands up and says, I would just like to say, I've never had salmon run through me this quickly. And he ran out of the room, went to the bathroom. It's just, it's more that I've had great experiences than odd stuff. There was one night we were, again, at one of the dinners ahead of the Mark Twain Prize. And I'm sitting at a table with Alan King and his wife and Harry Belafonte and his wife, along with the other writers and producers. Now, I didn't know at the time that Alan King had been one of the March with Martin Luther King. And he and Harry Belafonte, with all the Freedom Riders and all, they were part of it. So they're reconnecting, and I'm like a fly on the wall just listening. And Alan King tells a story. He said the night before the march, they have a big rally at this huge, massive theater. And he goes, I'm the only white person in the building. And they introduce me, and I walk on stage, and there's 7,500 black people looking at me. We're there to honor Martin Luther King. We're going to march. And he goes, you people are very stupid. He goes, he's going to take you to Selma. I'll take you to fucking Vegas. Let's go. And it was just so great. And you see, that's how this and when you get the inside stories, from about celebrities, what their lives are really like. And, Alan King would tell us stories. He used to open for Judy Garland and what that was all about, and how he said she was, they literally hooked her on drugs when she was 14. By the time she was doing The Wizard of Oz, they had her so wrapped up on pills, she didn't know where she was. And the thing that always killed me about that, if you figure towards the end of her life, there was a time when she was homeless and bouncing from couch to couch. You can't tell me, and I'm saying just to you as a human, you can't tell me that the millions and millions of dollars she made for those studios, nobody could rent her a fucking apartment for $1,000 a month. Really?
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane. You hear now about a celebrity who's really down on their luck. I don't care what happened. I don't know if they had a drug problem, if they were an asshole, whatever it is. This person helped you make multi-millions of dollars. You can't get him a room? Really? Really? I'm not driven by money, so I never understood that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. So we got to wrap up soon. I got to ask you.
Yes.
Looking back at your career, and I always like to get this question. I always ask this question because it always fascinates me the different answers I get. Sometimes with actors, sometimes with comics, writers. What are a few things that you're most proud about in your career? You've had a great career. Hell, you work with Joan Rivers. You work with mega stars. Legend. Barry Manilow and Joan Rivers are legends.
Yeah.
Besides that, that's a given. But what are some things that make you really proud about your career in life?
Well, all right. I think the first one, this is germane to nobody knows what I'm talking about. There was a comic back in New York named Adrienne Tolsch, who was the MC at Catch a Rising Star on Bill Sheff's late wife. She was wonderful. When I broke in at Catch, she was the MC. She and Bill Maher were MCing, and JJ Wolf, the MCs. And Belzer was still around. And she was great. She was at the forefront of women in comedy when they, and she opened a lot of doors for a lot of people. And if you think about it, in 1981, 82, 83, it was really still an all-boys club. And she's the head MC at the hottest club in town, in New York. It was a big deal. About 10 years ago, she got esophageal cancer and got very sick and passed away. She was married to Bill Sheff for 30. They're my best friends. And they held a memorial for her. And David Letterman came because Bill worked for Letterman for 20 years. And at St. Peter's Church in New York. And I was asked to speak, do some a speech, not a eulogy, but there were like 5 or 6 of us that spoke. And it was really, really deeply, deeply funny and very touching. And I think that night, at Adrian's memorial is the thing I'm most proud of. Nobody will ever see it. Nobody will ever know about it. When Joan died at Joan's memorial in New York, I helped Melissa with her eulogy and her remarks, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that after a lot of turmoil with drugs and drinking and behavior, I managed to keep working, and I'm a much better human being than I was at this old, decrepit age. It's like, and you'll probably understand this. I made a lot of people laugh, either directly or through other people. And that's, Craig Shoemaker.
Yeah, I know Shoe. He's a Philly guy.
Yeah. He does a whole lot of thing about, like these seminars on laughter is healing. And I believe that. And if you think about it, I don't know if I'm most proud of or happiest about, I've spent most of my adult life in the company of the funniest people in the world. How bad could it be? I get to laugh all the time. Yeah, look what you're doing. Your podcast, and I went through a lot of the people who are on this thing. What I love about this is that you've had so many like odd character actors or musicians.
Well, that's Cooper Talk. This is my new one. You're on my new one. This is Coop's Comedy Corner. This is where I focus on comics. Cooper Talk, I've done over 1,000 episodes,
right?
Which it is funny. I've done. I found when I was in LA and I started that podcast, I targeted character actors, and it turns out, just like comics, all character actors are friends, and they all have like the Italian character actors and the tall, good-looking ones.
Oh,
but that's the thing. I mean, but that's the thing. I think with entertainment, a lot of times I hear people. What I hear a lot of times, when people say, "I've stayed around this long," like you just said.
Yeah.
And that's what's important, because you have, and so it's a matter of and you're still writing. You're still working with Brian Manilow. Now, are you on Twitter? Are you on any of those sites?
No, I'm on Facebook. I tried to figure out Twitter at one point in time, but I couldn't figure it out, and because of Elon Musk, I won't go on X. I can't. I mean, I just.
Now, would you ever get on stage and do stand up again, or no?
I doubt it. The last time I did something is 20-something years ago. I was asked at like a benefit. I mean, I don't want to embarrass anybody. I couldn't remember anything. I mean, I haven't been on stage in 25 years. And first of all, I'd have to dress up. I just remember the stress of going on. It's like, what am I? I could probably get a minute. Can you still remember, if you have an act to do, can you remember all of it?
I'll be honest. A guy I know books a room around here, and he's like, "You should headline," and I'm like, "I can't remember 45 minutes." I take up notes, and I host the show once a month, and I'll do 15 up front, then I'll bring a guest set on, then I'll do 10 in between. But then when I do the 10 in between instead of doing 25 up front, so I could go back and look at this stuff. But it's also though. But I think you lose the muscle. Like if I was belting it out, like when I used to be on the road all the time, you remember it. But when you get older, and also you get bored. Like, I have some guy sent me a message on Facebook about a bit I did back in like 1991. I didn't even remember it. And then I went, oh yeah. And I remember shit. I remember people and stuff. So anyway, well, hopefully you'll get back on. Well, just keep writing the funny stuff on Facebook. People, go on Facebook and look up Larry Amoros. He's got some stuff that's really funny. And they're short. It's not like you have to sit there and watch like one of these bits that says see more. You're like, I don't want to see more. I hate that. Like, I hate that on LinkedIn. People put like see more. I'm like, and then there's like 5 bullet points about business. I'm like, you're talking about having breakfast with your fucking kid. Why is there like business points for that? But so anyway, so Larry, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been great. I'm glad, we've talked on Facebook. People, you got to watch. Just follow Larry. You can follow me, people. You can follow, well, first of all, thank you to Comedy Trainwreck and Jimmy Corhan. He has a great thing going there. Follow us on YouTube. Julia Scotty's got a show. John Kensel, Coleman Green, Corey Alexander. He's got a bunch of people up there. You can follow him and support Comedy Trainwreck and follow us and subscribe to our shows. This is my 14th episode of this show, and I've had Larry on, Rich Scheidner, Steve Scrovan, Jimmy Schubert, Wendy Liebman. I've had some great acts on. And so follow that. Go to my other website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,025 episodes. I haven't done an interview in 3 weeks, but tomorrow I'm interviewing Uncle Cracker, And then the next day after, I'm interviewing my buddy who's Dog Stars drummer, Rob Melhouse, who was an actor, and now he's really concentrating on music. Also on YouTube, the Coop Tank. That's my business podcast. I do a roundtable with 3 South Jersey and Philly business people. I just moderate them. Go subscribe to that. And that's about it. You can email me at thecooptank@yahoo.com. Follow Comedy Trainwreck. Look up Larry Amoros. Don't forget, if you're in South Jersey, Splits at Laurel Lanes, Route 73. The next Cocktails with Cooper is Monday, January 6th. We get like 70 business people come out. You'll make some contacts. And so go to Laurel Lanes, laurelLanesNJ.com. I'm Steve Cooper. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Larry said it's Kwanzaa, so I'm taking his word for it. And whatever else you're celebrating, you have a great night, and we'll talk to you next time.
Coop's Comedy Corner.